Iowa knew my brand. And then the next thing that happened was the whole country closed down. So here I am.
We're glad to have you, Terrence, and look forward to your continued participation. Suzanne, and then I'm going to mess, is it Leonie? You'll be after Suzanne.
Hi, I work for the University of Florida, and primarily in the community of Immokalee. I have a monthly event, Ciclavia Immokalee, which is all about health and fitness, and we have a lot of families that come each month. And if you're, well, with the audience tonight, you're not familiar with Immokalee, it's a farm worker community. A lot of migrant farm worker families out there. And now I'm going to lose my video because I just got home. I'm going to eat and you don't want to watch me eat. Nice.
Thank you, Suzanne. And then our other Suzanne, were you able to get your microphone to work? I guess not. So I'd like to thank you again for coming this evening, and I'll share our screen now of our slide deck, and this is also going to be available to you. So, and as we go through here, let's see if I can make this move. So we've completed our announcements, or I'll continue with the announcements. And then we've done the introductions already, kind of got this back, not in the order that Birgit set it up, but we're doing well. Tonight we have David Wildman, and David's going to be speaking on tips and tools on building and improving your brand. David is the owner and creative director of Wildman Design Incorporated, and they'll be discussing the finer points of brand design to breathe new life into your business. Born and raised in Austria, David has been fascinated with all things design and marketing from an early age. Let him continue his introduction as he chooses. Our September meeting is on, again, the first Tuesday, September 1st.
Enter your meeting.
Okay, and that topic is applying for grants online. And we have a panel which includes experts, Laura Simmelink with the Community Foundation of Collier County. I apologize if I mispronounced her name. Susan Golden, Collier County's Community and Human Services Division. Bernice Kurtavage, Southwest Florida Workforce Development Board. And Gloria Mormon, Director of Development, Redlands Christian Migrant Association. And Donna Johnson, Hardy Johnson, will be our moderator. Our next meeting after that is October 6th, and that topic is volunteer management systems, software, and logic. So at this point, I'll turn it over to David. And David, would you like me to allow you to share your screen?
Yeah, that would be great. Here in just a few minutes, I'll share my screen then. So it's an honor to be with all of you guys. I just looked back through my emails, and it was actually August of last year that Brian made the first introduction with your group. So this has been like a year in the making, and so I'm glad we're all here. I know we were supposed to be together in person, and that's 2020 had a different idea with all of us. Seems like it. And so, you know, as all of you have realized, is the world looks a little different right now, and we have two choices, right? We can either cower down and say, oh, poor me, or we can actually take this as an opportunity to grow our nonprofits, our business, shift the way we do things. And I truly believe the people that have a quick understanding of the situation and make the best of it will thrive actually during this time. And so I don't know how all of your businesses are going, but for me, I had, you know, a few clients pull back or stop their spending with us. And for each one of those, 3 new ones showed up that were way better. So I think a lot of people are using this time of a hard stop, of a quarantine, whatever it may be, to redefine their work, right? To get better at things. And so We've done this too here. Like Mark said in the introduction, I started my own company almost 2 years ago now. Now, I've been doing this for over 25 years. I just went full-time with it 2 years ago. My background is in the nonprofit world as well. My dad was a pastor, so I grew up in a minister's house. So I have a lot of experience with churches, nonprofits. And the other nonprofit I worked for was the Austrian Red Cross. I was actually an EMT there for 4 years in Austria. And Austria is one of those odd countries. I think there's only like 2 or 3 in the whole world where the Red Cross actually provides the majority of ambulance service to the country, mostly through volunteers. And so I was not just an EMT, but I was also in the communications area. So I learned fairly young that you have to communicate clearly, especially with volunteers. In the nonprofit sector, you have to be, understanding. You have to show a lot of empathy. So when I put like volunteers on the schedule and they were like, well, I got something going on, I couldn't be like, whoa, people are going to die if you're not going to show up, right? That wasn't a lot of empathy. I showed authority of like, hey, I have the authority to schedule you, but that was no empathy. And I realized quickly that without empathy, it's not really going to work. And 2020 is another year, another opportunity for us to show a lot of empathy. People are hurting. Your customers are hurting. Your donors are hurting. The people that you're helping through your nonprofits, they're hurting as well. So empathy is a big thing in the branding world. So why am I saying all of this? So my background is obviously nonprofit, but I started designing when I was 8 years old, as far as I remember. And then finally a computer came along. I did actually literally copy and paste things on paper on a copier before my parents finally bought us a computer in 1994. So had it was like a 486 or something like that with I don't know, 8 megabytes of RAM or something. It was really amazing. And how far we've come since, right? And that was a whole new world for me. I learned Corel Draw. That was like my first piece of software. I really sunk my teeth into it. And then in the late 90s, the introduction to the Adobe Creative Suite came along. And that's when my whole perspective changed. And I've been using those tools since then. I had a great teacher in my high school that saw that I was terrible at programming. We had to learn how to do C++ and Pascal and all that stuff. And I was terrible at it. And he said, if you just give me the minimum, I'll leave the Photoshop CD here on for you. You can grab it on the way out. I just forgot. It was back in the days when you pirated software. Anybody remember that? Nowadays, we just pay for subscription. I took advantage of it. I learned InDesign, Illustrator when I was just 16 years old. And that teacher changed my life. And I still, when I go back to Austria, I still try to find him. He's still not retired. Getting close to it though, and I thank him for changing my life, literally, by showing empathy, by having an understanding of what my gifts are. And he decided to go beyond the curriculum and invest into me, and that really changed my life. So after working at a couple of churches in Oklahoma and in Florida, I now started my own company, and I deal not just with nonprofits and churches, but large and small businesses, and create websites, branding packages, brand messaging. And that's really what I want to get at today is before you start taking out your computer or your pencils or your markers or whatever you use to design anything, I learned that it's first and utmost important first to define your story first. A lot of nonprofits have a challenge to tell their story. And that's really what I'm going to spend the multitude of my time on tonight is give you tools of how you can actually share your story in a way. And recently, last year, I became a StoryBrand certified. And I don't know, has any one of you ever heard of Don Miller and StoryBrand by any chance? Raise your hand or wave at me or something. Okay, Mark has. And so it's a powerful framework that essentially takes the method of storytelling, like any good movie you've ever seen, any good book you've ever read, follows that exact same framework because our brains are wired a certain way. Over thousands of years, our brains are wired to respond a certain way. So at this point, I'm going to share my screen, and I have a little bit of a slideshow demo. So hopefully everybody can see this. And we started with this, and the slideshow is kind of directed towards businesses, but it applies just as much to nonprofits. And if you hear my toddler behind me, that's our 2.5-year-old, almost 3-year-old. He's getting a bath next door. So the joys of working at home, right? So most companies waste an enormous amount of money on marketing. And we've all been there, right? I've even heard in introductions, hey, we have Google ad budget, we have Facebook ads, we're trying all these things. So we're spending money on all these ads. And then we wonder, why are we not getting any return on it? Has anybody ever been in that spot before? You actually were like, you put a lot of hopes on your ads and you send them out and then there's crickets. And you wonder why, what's going on? We have the audience defined, we have the age group defined, everything seems to hum along just fine. The website seems to look just fine. We spend a lot of money on a designer. They know Photoshop, or if you don't have a designer, you have a cousin that knows Photoshop or a nephew and you hire them to do it. And they produce a website that kind of looks like this. And I'm sure a lot of you have maybe seen a website like this before. It's a beautiful website, right? It has a great image, it's clean, it has a cool logo in the top left. The problem is, it really doesn't tell me what's going on here. The big tagline is your journey starts here. And then there's some words underneath it that sound great. Artisan innovative solutions, right? And then the top right corner of your website, which a lot of you know is probably the most important real estate of your website because your eye moves in a Z pattern from left to right, goes across, and then goes across. All of you designers, nod your head, you know what I'm talking about, right? So you go from left to right, and what's in the right corner? It says, why start? Why indeed, right? The website doesn't give me anything. It says home, our mission, learn more again, get started. So those are primary call to action. So this button right here is where my eye goes the most. It's the primary call to action of a website. And it just says, get started. So imagine you go out on your first date. So all of you that are married, remember back when you took out your wife on the first date, right? How would that work if you would say, get started or learn more, right? That's a terrible, terrible pickup line. Even I know that. You know, I was not good at dating. I don't know how I landed my wife. And, you know, I was kind of almost in that department of just terrible pickup lines. That's a terrible pickup line. That doesn't tell me anything about what's going on, what is going on in here. So a lot of companies waste an enormous amount of money. And this website probably cost them a lot of money, right? The designer did a beautiful job with it. There's nothing wrong with it from a design standpoint of view, but it tells me nothing about the company. So people buy product only after they read words that make them want to buy those products. So all of you have been on Amazon, right? And you buy the product, and most of you guys buy stuff on Amazon because you read the reviews. At least that's what I do, right? I look at the star rating and then I go back down and be like, oh, this guy gave it 5 stars. And then I look at the 1-star reviews too. You know, the people that say that plugged it in, it didn't work, had to send it back, or the humidifier stunk like, you know, raw eggs or something. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to buy that dehumidifier. I'm going to go something else because the words that I'm reading convinced me about whether to buy something or not. And that's because our brain is wired to do 2 things. Our brain is wired to survive and thrive and conserve calories. So instinctively, whether you're aware of it or not, our brains have developed over the course of time to do 2 things: survive and thrive and conserve calories, right? And so the reason why that is, you know, back in the day, imagine yourself, you're in the medieval times or whatever, and back in the day, you constantly worried whether somebody's an ally or a friend or a foe in your life, right? So were they friendly to me, then I know I can bond with them if the enemy comes. If they're not friendly to me, there might be an enemy to me, right? So those are 2 things that our brain is wired to do: survive and thrive. And that is still there. Even though we're not in a survival fight all day long, our brain still decides it. So there's simple things like body language things. I don't know if you have any body language experts in here, but one thing I've heard before was if you stand up in front of a crowd, you show people both hands, because the back of our brain constantly monitors for threats. And if you have one hand in your pocket, the brain tells you he might have a weapon, and you're not even aware of that this is going on anymore. But it's those subtle things that our brains constantly are searching for information, right? The other thing our brain does, it conserves calories. And that goes back again to survival instincts. If I have to work really hard to do something, my brain will work harder. and it will burn more calories, make me more tired. The same thing happens with a junky website like that we looked at. If your brain has to look at this and be like, hold on, what is going on here? Let me stare at this for a while. Let me figure this out. Who are they actually? What journey are they talking about? And how I'm going to learn more. And are they artisans? Are they bakers? Are they really innovative bakers that, you know, bake artisan bread and give me some sort of solution? My brain is burning calories right now. So when I went to the StoryBrand marketing workshop in Nashville, I spent 4 days in that workshop. And I'm a long distance runner. I enjoy running. I felt more exhausted after spending 4 days. At the night, I just drugged myself back to the hotel and I went to sleep because my brain was working overdrive all the time. And then I realized how much calories it actually takes for our brains to work. So those are the things that you need to be aware of if you address your donor, if you address your potential client. I know most of you are in the nonprofit sector, so let's just stick with donors. Donors constantly will look, how are you going to help me survive and thrive? And how can you help me conserve calories? So if your pitch to your donor is really long and fuzzy, they're going to check out. And they're going to check out a lot quicker than you were aware of. So if your homepage is filled with long text, with no images, with nothing that invites them into the story, that's when the high bounce rates come out, right? People just click off your website, they're not interested anymore. Because our brains are wired to do this all the time. So our brain is constantly working out. It's constantly burning calories, right? So let's just imagine that each thought that you present to your potential donor is a bowling ball. How many of you guys have been to a bowling alley before? Those bowling balls are surprisingly heavy, right? First time I ever went, I was like, I'm confident, I can lift this, right? So I pick one up and I'm like, oh man, I'm a skinny European, so I don't really work out well. And so it was kind of embarrassing. So let's imagine there's this guy and we give him one thought, right? It's easy to hold one bowling ball. No big deal there yet, right? But now let's give him another one. All right, well, we're still okay. It's not a big deal. So now we're giving them a third thing. It's getting a little bit more difficult at this point. What would happen if I give him a fourth bowling ball? At that point, he not drops just the fourth one, he drops all of them, right? And that's what we're doing with confusing websites. That's what we're doing with confusing marketing language. We give people bowling balls that we consider be very logical, because all of you guys are very familiar with your nonprofits. You're familiar with your business, right? You know, you use inside language all the time. But the person that you're trying to address to, they're not in your inner circle. They're not with you in the office every day. They don't read your stuff. They don't follow you as much, as. So Irene was talking about, I think Irene is your name, right? You're talking about Guatemala, right? So you would probably use language that is very like, your organization knows it, your staff knows it, your inner donors knows it, the people receiving the help know the language. You're referring to cities, you're referring to governments, you're referring to political situations because you know them really well. The potential donor has no idea. So to them, each thought is a bowling ball. And then when you make the call to action really elusive too and really foggy, imagine those bowling balls being rubbed in Vaseline. It becomes impossible for you to hold them. And then we get disappointed why our marketing languages don't work. So to sum it up in one sentence is, if you confuse, you lose. And that's what a lot of businesses do. That's what churches do. That's what nonprofits do. Again, I come from the church world a lot, and we're all guilty of that. The churches I grew up in, we would say things like, we want to build the kingdom of God. And to a lot of people are like, what does that mean? That sounds more like a terrorist organization than a church, right? They're talking about building some sort of kingdom and all that kind of stuff. Now, I was an associate pastor for a while too, and I was guilty of that. I would stand up there and talk to people, and I would use words, and I could tell it on people's faces. They were like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I had to stop for a second and maybe explain it. And then you could see those light bulbs go off. Like, oh, now we're rolling, right? So if you confuse, you lose. Story is a sense-making device. I have a toddler at home that you hear in the background of me. What do I do with him every night before I lay him to bed? I read him a story. Story times are not just, I get a little bit of feedback there. Yeah, there we go. So stories are not just great entertainment. They are a tool to train. So when I'm telling my toddler stories, I can see him make connections now that he wasn't being able to make before. So I'm reading him Goodnight Construction Site and The Little Blue Truck and all these things. And a lot of you guys, oh yeah, I remember those books, right? Those are amazing. And I keep reading them over and over again, and he makes sense. He's starting to make connections in life because of the way the story works. It makes sense to his brain, right? So let's unpack a little bit about how a story actually works and how it benefits in your marketing. So the StoryBrand framework is a 7-part framework, and I'm going to quickly kind of run through each one of those steps a little bit here. But it all starts with a character. So you think of a good movie, think of a great book that you've read. It all starts with a character, right? So we're thinking about, Jason Bourne. He wanted to know who he is, right? And so that was one of the things that a character wants. So in the earlier story, we learned about Jason Bourne. We kind of get a little bit of background on him, and that's what a character has. Now he comes up. So StoryBrand marketing principle 1 is like when you agitate a customer's desire to enter into the story your brand is telling. So you have to acknowledge that a character is looking for something, right? So the more you know the character, in your case, the donor, that's very important for you. So spend all your time, spend all your money, spend all your knowledge learning more about your donor. Who is that person that donates to your organization? Who is the person that attends your church? Who is the ideal customer that comes to your business? What are they like? What are their interests? What are their means that they have? So in every kind of good movie too, we start learning a little bit about the character, right? So we learn about their background, all those kind of things. So those are important. The next thing is the character comes up against a problem. So what's the problem, right? In the big movie, they might not know who they are, or they want to get the girl, right? So in a romantic comedy, the character is just, hopelessly in love. And here's the problem. He wants the girl, but the girl is with somebody else, right? So every good story has a problem. Without a problem, you don't really have a story. So if you stop talking about your customer's problem, they stop paying attention to your brand. A lot of brands have a hard time with this because we don't want to go negative, right? We don't want to talk about the problem. We don't want to agitate. We want to be solutions-based. So a lot of people jump to the word solutions. We're just talking about solutions. But if I'm entering a story without a problem, there's no cause to it. So let's imagine again, let's go back to Jason Bourne. And all he sits around is like, oh, he wants to lose 30 pounds, or he, needs to find the right litter box for his cat, or he's going to pick up his dry cleaning. Those are problems, but those are terrible, boring problems that you would turn off that movie in no time, right? You would fall asleep. We're like, forget that. There's no cause behind this. But if the problem is something that really hits home and affects the viewer, like affects you as it hooks you into the story. So for you, it's important to create these we call them story loops, right? So when you find yourself with a potential donor, it's good to agitate the problem and say, did you know that most kids in Guatemala grow up malnourished and have no chance to get any education? Okay, now you opened up a story loop. So now my brain is like, I want to know how this ends. So how are you going to help me, help people in Guatemala? So that's the kind of story loops that you need to look for in your communication, on your website, in your marketing materials that you want to. You need to hook them with a story loop, right? The next thing is the person has the character, our hero, so to speak, has a problem, and then he meets a guide. So in every good movie, again, we have Obi-Wan, we have, help me out here. Like in any kind of good movie, who can you think of as a good guide? Luke Skywalker had Yoda, right? Yoda played the guide role. What other movies come to mind? Let's hear from you guys a little bit. That hero and the guide role.
Pinocchio and Jiminy Cricket.
Yes, good one. Yeah, absolutely. We're going back to children's books, right? Brian.
Well, yeah, Snow White had the 7 dwarves, I guess.
There you go. Yes, yes, absolutely. Any kind of good book, any kind of movie, which the guide shows up at some point. And he usually shows up in the crucial part of the story, when the problem really starts becoming evident. And the hero comes up against a problem that he seemingly can't break through. And that's when the guide shows up. Third principle of StoryBrand is your customer is the hero of the story, not your brand. That's probably the biggest paradigm shift that StoryBrand provides. That marketing principle, that marketing framework is, you're not the hero, the customer is. How many websites have you ever gone to where the website is all about the company, right? And so let's say, hey, I need plumbing needs, the toilet is overflowing. So I go to a website and I go to naplesplumbing.com and I see that, hey, we are the top plumbing company in Naples. We have been in the top 50 metrics of the Chamber of Commerce. Actually, our grandfather started that company in 1917, and we have 50 vans that are really cool designed. We have this really great graphics on it, and we have a corporate barbecue that we do every month. And so if I'm looking for plumbing needs, I go to that person's website, and it's all about them. And I have no idea how am I going to hire one of those cool vans to come by my house. The toilet's overflowing. The wife is mad at me. My child is screaming. And I go to the website and it's all about them. They're the hero in the story. And I've ventured to say 90%, 95% of the websites that we can pull up, it's mostly like that. What's in the top? About us, about our story, learn more about us. And the customer, the hero that has the problem of the overflowing toilet, pardon my French, but I don't give a rat's butt about your vans or your history or your grandfather. He probably was a great person, but at that very moment, I really don't care. And so many companies, nonprofits, shoot themselves in the foot by doing this, by playing the hero and not the guy. So that's probably, if you take any notes tonight, that should probably be the biggest thing you chart down, is like, never play the hero, always play the guide. Because the guide is actually the strongest character in the story. If you think of, a Yoda or something like that, they never change. They stay consistent. You don't see the guide freaking out, running, trying to find a solution. The guide stays steady. The guide actually never chases after the hero. The hero comes to the guide for advice, right? So you as a nonprofit, you need to stand firm in your guide role. So I'm just gonna pick on Irene a little bit, just because I love nonprofits that work overseas. So I'm going to use you as an example a little bit too. You need to say, hey, we have a solution for this. I know you hear about a lot of issues in Guatemala, but we have something that we have figured out, and here's how you can help, right? Which leads us to our next part. The guide gives the character a plan, right? So a lot of people are really good about, playing the guide, and then they still talk about themselves, but they don't give the character now a plan of action, which is a very, very important part of it too, right? So you think back of the movie StoryBrand, principle number 4 is your customer needs an easy step-by-step plan to move forward, or they won't. So on any website, and I'm going to show you a few success stories in the nonprofit world afterwards, is you will see a clear plan of action, a clear call to action, a clear plan. Plans usually work well if you keep them to 3 to 4 steps. Something happens in the brain if you give somebody 5 steps. It falls off the cliff terribly. 3 is great, 4 is acceptable, 5 is terrible. So in all your communication, whether it's your Facebook ad or a webinar that you do or a website engagement, force yourself to think in 3 easy steps. And now think back of like marketing that actually worked on you. What was easy for you to sign up for? It's like, well, first, call us to get a quote. Secondly, we're going to show up and mow your lawn. Thirdly is you're going to love your lawn, and you will be the envy of the neighborhood. That to me is a clear plan. Instead of saying, well, first shop our lawn offerings and then compare it to your competitors, and then go look at this table and see which kind of lawnmowers that we use for your yard to pick which one might actually work best for you. and then sign this 15-page contract, and then we will show up to have you actually sign the contract, and then we will start on the next Saturday to actually mow your yard. Which plan is easier? Number one or number two? Number two, I already forgot which one it all was. Like, I mean, I mentioned the example, I already forgot which one it was. But the first one I remember, call to get a quote. Secondly, you guys will show up and mow my yard. Thirdly is, I'm gonna be the envy of the neighborhood. That's all at this point that I really need to know. So your donor, when they're looking to help people in Guatemala, for instance, there's a lot more that you probably wanna share. You know, I worked with Brian on Place of Hope in Haiti, and that's where, you know, Brian and I go years back from another job we worked at together. But Place of Hope, we were able to rebrand them and help them through this branding process. They have a lot going on. They did 7 things or 6 things, I think, that they primarily did, right? They have an orphanage, they had a vocational school, they had a language school, they had all sorts of different things that they did. And initially, they wanted to communicate all this to their customer or their potential donor. The problem is the donor at this point didn't quite care about all this yet. It was too soon in the story. So the donor would come to them and be like, hold on, what are you now? Are you a language school, or are you just an orphanage, or are you, you know, a school for middle-aged, middle graders or something like that? And so there were so many questions, even in their branding, it wasn't clear. There was no clarity with it. And the plan of action, when I remember on the initial website, there was like 15 different ways you could give, and I might exaggerate a little bit here, but there was a lot of different ways you can give. And so there was no clear way for me to engage. And so when I looked at this with clean eyes, I was like, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you do. I think you're some sort of place of hope, and I know you're in Haiti, but that could mean a lot of things. It wasn't even clear to me that you're working with children. That didn't say anything in it. It could have been a retirement community, or it could have been a political organization trying to help, you know, fight corruption problems in Haiti. So if it's not clear, forget how cute and clever you want to make it. Clarity is the new creativity. That's what we say. And then past the plan, you can't just give somebody a plan, you need to call them to action. So if you think back of that first website example that we did, the primary call to action, what is that on your website? It should be buy now, or donate now, or get involved, or change a life, or something very easy for me to understand. And it needs to be repeated over and over again. To the website example, the primary call to action on the websites that we design shows up about 7 to 8 times on just the homepage alone. And to some people, it's like, oh my gosh, that's a lot. Why is that buy now button here over and over again? People could just scroll to the top. They could, but they won't. So unless the cash register, the buy now button is where their eyes are, you're losing out on sales. So you need to call them to action, and the call to action needs to be very clear. Unless you clearly call people to action, they won't. People will not follow you into a fog. Have you ever tried like going on a hike in a fog? Nathan might know this. You know, you're up in Vancouver, BC, you actually have mountains. I grew up in the mountains. You sometimes get those fogs rolling in from the lake, and they can get really, really thick. And you're like, I have no idea where I'm going, right? I used to drive ambulances, and sometimes it got really foggy, and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm about to hit. I hope I'm not hitting anything, right? It's very hard for me to follow somebody into a fog. And if you make your call to action elusive, complicated, people will not follow you, because their brains now have to burn more calories, and the brain will tell them it's too much work, forget it. So you have to strip that down and make it as simple as possible. And at the end of the story, we have to remind people what's at stake. So we remind them about the successes that they're going to experience. So if they engage with your organization, with your nonprofit that helps kids in Guatemala, tell them about the successes that they will experience. They will live with the knowledge that they've changed the next generation. They will save, you know, their donation will save 10 children from poverty just today, in one day only. You know, they will have tangible successes, so things that they can actually grasp, whether it's, you know, they're getting pictures of those children that they've helped. That's a tangible thing. But to me, the intangible things are equally important. For me, the knowledge that I've done something meaningful with my means, with my time, that I've invested into the future of the country, that I've invested into helping that country change for the better, that to me is a success thing too. And with success in your communication, you can go a lot. So the stakes, imagine you are baking a cake, right? I'm a cook, I like to cook, but I'm a terrible baker. But with baking, you have to be really, really careful with the recipe. How many of you guys have learned that, right? You just, you pour stuff in and you're a little bit too quick on the baking soda and all of a sudden the thing doesn't turn out right. You have to be very precise. But in a cake recipe, there's usually a lot of flour. Success is the flour in your recipe. Talk a lot about it. Customers want us to cast a vision of what their lives can look like if they use our products or services. So I know this is a little bit more business language. Again, you guys are more in the nonprofit world, but describe what their life will look like if they've actually invested into your cause, if they've donated to it. This is what their life will look like. The other part is failure. Failure is the salt in a recipe. If you leave that out, the cake won't turn out quite right. You just need a little bit to remind them about it. If there's no consequences for not doing business with you, there's no reason to do business with you. So you have to remind them what's at stake. You have to remind them about the children that will go hungry tonight if you don't involve. And I know it's a little heavy-handed. So in your world, in the nonprofit, depends on what nonprofit you are, you can lean maybe a little bit heavier. But if you go to Sarah McLachlan, like In the Arms of the Angel, and makes you cry every time the cat commercial comes on, it's a little heavy, wouldn't you agree? Like the first time you see the commercial, you're like, okay, yeah, I'll probably give to PETA. And then the 20th times per hour that commercial runs, you're like, enough already. It's too heavy-handed. I care about cats and dogs, but man, this is a little bit too heavy. I think the world has other problems to address first, right? So that's too bad. That's an example that backfired. They were too heavy-handed on it. So to summarize it up, the StoryBrand marketing framework is, what do our customers want? What are our customers' external, internal, and philosophical problems that they're facing? So I'm going to expound just a little bit on it a little bit. The external problem is basically what gets in the way of them getting what they want. The internal problem is, how are they going to feel about that? And the internal problem is really why people make buying decisions. Why they engage with you is how they feel about something, right? Think back of your latest purchases that you've done. You probably bought it because in the end you felt something about it. Yeah, you needed a vacuum cleaner because the house was dirty. But the reason why you went with the Dyson stick vacuum, the really nice $500 model, the animal hair, was, yeah, I needed the features to it because I have a dog, but in the end, I wanted to feel pretty good about it. It was the feeling that I'm getting with the Dyson vacuum versus the Dust Devil that costs $40 versus $500. It's the internal feelings that I have about it. The philosophical problem is, why is it plain wrong for people to have to feel that way? So when you're addressing your donor and say, we have hungry children in Guatemala, it's just plain wrong for this to even happen. The government there shouldn't take food from those poor children. And I'm making stuff up, so please forgive me of this. But you can apply this to any situation right here. Is this shouldn't happen. It's plain wrong why this is going on. That's the philosophical problem that you need to address with people. And that's when they start to connect with you. So go back to Place of Hope in Haiti. We made a stronger emphasis on the fact that the root problem in Haiti is really a corrupt government. And with the donor, it resonated well. Now with the people that run the nonprofit that are actually on the ground in Haiti, it caused a little bit of an issue, so we had to pull back on that a little bit. But most donors, potential donors that we've addressed with that language, it resonated with them. I remember years ago when the earthquake happened, I was on a treadmill in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I lived at that time, and I was really moved by it. And I gave money to the Red Cross through my phone. And then I come to find out that the majority of my donation went into somebody else's pocket. And the stuff that actually made it to Haiti was misallocated, was misused, was used by some corrupt government. At that point, to me, it was like, what's the point of me helping Haiti? That's just how I felt. Doesn't make it right, or doesn't make it right. I know that I might be a bad human being for feeling this way, but I had bad experiences. So in your nonprofit, you have to acknowledge that some people have skepticism about your cause, but you need to address those feelings. So in Place of Hopes of Haiti, we were like, we understand that you've helped people in Haiti and you've probably gotten disillusioned with it. But we feel it's just wrong for you have to feel this way. You should be able to invest into a nonprofit that has clarity and transparency in everything that they do, right? So we address the internal and the philosophical problem with that. Have we positioned our brand to be the guide and not the hero? That's the next big thing on the checklist that you need to go through in your branding and your marketing. Are we consistently playing the guide and not the hero? Have we created a clear plan for the hero to win the day? Have we told our potential donor of like, here's how you get involved with this cause? And it's not a apply now and 50 pages of paperwork and all this kind of stuff. It needs to be very, very simple. And it's okay. So in Place of Hope of Haiti, we made it very, very simple, the initial step to get involved. Now, was that the only way for them to get involved? No. There was a lot of other areas, but as the donor journey evolves, as they're becoming partners, that's where you start opening up the next layer of involvement. That's when you open up again about like, hey, we know that, language is really important to you. Guess what? We also have a language school that we specialize in. Here's some success stories that we have a system that really works with those kids. And then you open up that next box. Take them one step at a time. You didn't meet your spouse and say, here is everything about me on the first date. They will run from you, right? Because you've unpacked all the good, the bad, and the ugly. They will not marry you. You gave them just enough to get to that second date. And that's how you need to think in your communication, in your branding. What's the next step that I can take them on? And how can I make that next step easy too? How can I break that next step down into 3 easy steps? And how can I make that next step? And you take it one step at a time. The plan is like you come up against the river, like a raging river, right? And the guide takes the hero by the hand and says, I know this river looks impassable right now. COVID-19 looks impassable right now to a lot of us. But what does the guide do? It takes the hero that has a problem by the hand and says, first, we're going to jump on this rock. And then we're going to jump on this one and the third one. And then we're going to be on the other side. And all of a sudden, this river looks like a possibility to me if we're breaking this down into 3 easy steps. And then are we calling our calls and calls to action clear enough? Are we saying buy now or donate now instead of learn more? Go that direction. You're going to get way more engagement. Have we helped our hero imagine how we can improve their lives? Have we identified the consequences we are helping our hero to avoid? So those are the stakes that we want to go to, all these kind of things. So that's the StoryBrand 7-part framework in a nutshell. The reason why I'm going through this is, I'm a marketing and design agency and a branding agency. So when somebody comes to us and say, hey, we want a new logo, we want a new website, I take all of my customers through this brand exercise first. Because it's no good for me to design them a logo that's not going to connect with who they really are. And a lot of companies, a lot of nonprofits, they're kind of set in their ways. They know themselves really well, but they forgot how to talk to potential customers. They've kind of went by the way a little bit, and in their churches are notorious for that. They get caught in ruts and all those kind of things. Businesses too. I had a customer that reached out to me from the other coast here in Florida that has a piece of software that works with chiropractors. And he has a really, really great product. The software is smart enough to take transcripts from the doctor when they have those little voice recordings, and it listens to the voice recordings and it deciphers which treatment codes get applied, and that gets automatically then worked with the insurance. So he has a system that really helps chiropractors work so much more efficient. But for 16 years, his website was just a jumbled mess of technical data, and we're cloud-based and we're a SaaS thing and we're this and that. And he wondered why he couldn't really engage with it. But his customer is a chiropractor that is frustrated with his billing, that is confused with insurance systems that seem to be rigged against him. Because when the audit comes along, all those guys constantly lose money and the insurance companies bank the money. So that's the frustration. So we took that and we developed that into a website and says, that's the stuff you need to talk about. Forget about the cool features of your software. That's later on in the story. But you need to address the problem that they have and say, as a chiropractor, understand how hard it is to keep up with your billing and how hard it is to miss those important filing dates that you have and how those audits can really just rip you off. Guess what? I have a software that works for you that is almost like another person in your office. And for this amount, you apply for a demo. We come and demo it for you. Second step is we onboard your whole staff and train them. And the third is you can finally focus on treating your customers and not feel like a financial institution. That was the simple plan of call to action that we did with them. For 16 years, he couldn't figure it out. Running him through that helped him now clearly communicate with his customer. So that's the power of that. And that's why we're running everything through this. So you can do this actually on your own. You can go to my brand script. I think it's mystorybrand.com. Let me look it up real quick. It is. I think it's mystorybrand.com. And it's a framework. Yeah. And it's basically a free tool software that you sign up and you can run through this yourself. And you can say, okay, what is the character in my story? What problems do they have? How do I play the guide in this? How can I quickly give them a plan? How can I call them to action? A direct call to action is buy now. A transitional call to action is download that free PDF. That's a transitional call to action. I'm not quite ready to do business with you yet. Give me a PDF that I can quickly do that. So let's see. Sorry, I think you just chatted me. Sorry, it's not pulling up. Anyway, so that's the software that you can go to. It's mystorybrand.com. Let's look at a couple of websites. I will pull those up separately, but I wanted to give you a couple of next steps that you can apply. You can read the two books that are behind me. One is called Building a Story Brand by Don Miller, and the other one is Marketing Made Simple by Don Miller as well. You can create that brand script with the website that I just gave you, and you can finally have a clarified message. So you can do all these things on your own. So this doesn't, I'm not here to have you hire me or hire us or anything like that. This is something that you can actually do on your own too. And I remember Brian, I think he bought the book ahead of time, kind of worked through it with his own staff. And then in the end, he kind of ended up looping us in and we helped him out with that. The other thing that I just want to provide you guys some free resources that I have. If you go to my website, which is wildmandesign.com, there's a free brand checklist that you can download. It's a free PDF that you can just kind of hop on there. That is like a self-assessment that, helps you kind of define how well am I doing in the branding section. How's my website looking? Am I being clear in my branding, all that kind of stuff. And on that website too, you can book a free 30-minute consultation with me. I'd love to take some time, one-on-one, just to kind of hear what your struggles are in your branding. Are you fighting challenges all the time? Is the website confusing? Do you not even have your brand story figured out? I'd love to help you with that too. So you can find all those things at wildmandesign.com. But just to remind you, in the end, if you confuse, you lose. If you walk away with nothing else today, remember that if you confuse, you lose. Noise is the enemy, and creating a clear message is the best way to grow your business. So that's really the end of the instructional part of this. Mark, how are we doing on time? I have some websites that we can look at if you want to.
We've got about 4 minutes left on our schedule. We can run a little bit over if you have something you want to share.
So let's look at a couple of websites here that hopefully you can see this. Can you see this now? It's okay. There's 3 websites that I just pulled that StoryBrand agencies have developed that fall in the nonprofit section. So I didn't want to show you guys like plumbing or churches or all that kind of stuff, but stick with the nonprofit. Here's one that's called newstorycharity.org. So a couple of things about this website that works really well is they have a primary call to action in the top right corner. It's donate. It's really easy, really simple. The eye goes from left to right, comes back down here in a Z pattern. It says, welcome to the neighborhood, addresses a problem right out the gate. Families can't stay safe in their homes if they can't pay rent. Join a generous group of monthly donors changing lives. Okay, so on the first impression, it kind of passes the grunt test. And those are websites that I literally just pulled up right before we got on there. I don't even know these companies. I just took them from the StoryBrand directory because they're done with StoryBrand in mind. They passed the grunt test. So to me, this is an organization helping people with their rent. I can donate, I can help a family. It says the same thing, it's a repeated call to action, donate, I'm helping a family. How we work, there's some other stuff too. You notice that good StoryBrand websites have a limited menu up here. 2-3 items is enough. You always can have, so many websites have like 10 things up there. And I don't know where to look, and one of them is home. Well, we know you can click on the logo to go home, right? If I scroll down, they have some trust symbols right out the gate too that kind of gives them a little bit of credibility. They already talked about the problem, now they're introducing themselves as a guide. Join us in building a world without global homelessness, reiterating of what they're actually solving. They're solving homelessness. Support local economies, give 100% to building homes, see your impact in action. This is what we call a value stack. Those are things out of the success bucket from the brand script. I get to support local economies. I give 100% to building homes. So for me to donate, I help build homes, and I get to see my impact in action. So to my mind, those are successes. And if you outline the successes, in my mind, that adds value to me. So we call these things a value stack. And then we partner with some amazing people. Again, this organization makes sure that they're talking about who they're affiliated with to give it credibility. So in your nonprofit world, if you have trust symbols, if you've been on national TV with your stuff, put those things on there. It helps people develop that trust in you. They have stories, they have real life stories right there that they go through that once again invites me into it. And then you can sign up for email updates. So they do a lot of things well. It's not completely perfect, but they do a lot of things really well. Another thing that I saw is World Housing. 100% of the donation goes to building homes for family, a home for everyone. Again, top right corner, what do we see? Primary call to action, donate now. Learn more, I wish they would do something else here. I would just repeat the call to action, donate now. Over 1 billion people live in slums. That's a problem. They agitate the problem in section 2. So let's unpack a website real quick a little bit. Section 1 is the aspirational identity. This talks to the success. This talks to about how the donor might feel when they get involved with you. They want to change the world. They want to create a home for everybody. So if I'm looking at this as a potential donor, I'm like, oh my gosh, they look polished. This is something that I would love to do for people. I would love to build homes that look like this. Aspirational identity. I want to provide a home for everyone. We all want to do that. Now the problem comes into play. Over 1 billion people live in slums. That's a problem. 14%. Do you notice that there isn't a lot of words on that website? It's very streamlined down. StoryBrand forces you to think simple. It forces you to say a lot in just a few sentences. And to a lot of you techies out there, it's somewhat in conflict with SEO a little bit. Because SEO obviously looks at words and the amount of words and how those words flow with all that kind of stuff. We're about to launch a website for a landscaping company in Nashville tomorrow. And we've had to take a very StoryBrand and then just punt a little bit to make it SEO friendly enough. So that's a little bit on the side note right here. Our progress. World Housing provides homes to the most vulnerable families living in slums around the world. Communities thrive where families live with dignity, safety, and access. Yeah. 800 homes funded, 4,000 people housed, 6 countries. Let's see if we can find a plan section. There's a plan. Donate now. There's business partnerships. There's real estate partners. Plan isn't really all that great, honestly, on that. So let's see if they have another plan action. Donate now. Get involved. Some of these things could have been handled better. Let's see if we find a better plan section. This is Charity Water, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard before. That's a really famous a nonprofit. They went through StoryBrand. They came to one of the workshops. They worked through that too. Their initial website didn't look like anything like that too. So they have a clear call to action for them. It's join the spring. 1 in 10 people lack access to clean water. Again, the problem. They agitate that right off the bat. They don't just talk about, hey, we're building wells. We've been around for 15, 20 years. I don't know how long they've been around. We're located in 35 different countries. That doesn't matter yet. It says 1 in 10 people lack access to clean water. That to me is philosophically, but like, this shouldn't be. Everybody should have access to clean water, right? So to me, that's like, that agitates something on it. We're on a mission to change that. Here's how. 100% goes to the field. We prove every project, and then we only even partner with sustainable projects. So to me, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. They're not going into technical details. They're not like, well, you know, we're looking for that kind of soil to put a, you know, a pump in, a well in, all that kind of stuff. They're a little bit more larger. And did you notice that this is the website? This is it. They have a video there too that quickly explains it too. It's short and sweet, to the point. So those were just some nonprofit examples that not every website does everything of it, but it does all. It hits all the main points of it. They play the guide and not the hero in the story. They give people a clear call to action. They slimline this thing down really easy. It's a lot of icons. It's a little bit of text. There isn't a whole lot of text right there. So the next step in sustainability, I'm sure they could give us 50 pages on sustainability. They know a lot of their stuff, but forcing you to think simple, forcing you to reduce it down to what matters most to the potential donor in that moment. That's the art behind it. And my almost 3-year-old, he loves to scream in the background. So anyway, those were just some thoughts on that. And then we take, you know, the messaging framework that we've worked up, and then we move on to the actual branding, developing a logo that works, developing a tagline that's easy, developing a one-liner, which is essentially an elevator pitch. Imagine getting stuck in an elevator with somebody and they ask you, what do you do? Instead of saying is like, well, you know, I'm a CIO for a nonprofit, don't care, right? But if you say that 1 out of 10 people don't have access to clean water, all of a sudden you open up a story loop that I now need to hear how it ends. So if you're stuck on an elevator with somebody, train yourself with a one-liner. So we help people develop one-liners, taglines, then we move on to the visual branding, and then we move on to the website. So the website is like step 3 or 4 in all of this. We always start with the branding first. And in the practical sense, this was usually 3 90-minute sessions on Zoom that we go through, or in person. Now it's mostly Zoom because of COVID. And we help them clarify their marketing message and get to a point where they feel confident about their business again. And they have all the tools. We give people a 20-page messaging guide that they can start using right away in their Facebook ads, in their marketing language. And it's, to me, the most rewarding thing is to see just people have a new fire. You know, I deal with people that have been in the business for 20, 30 years, and they're starting to kind of get run down, and they're kind of in the rut of things. And then they go through this, and you can see the firelight in their eyes again. They remember why they even got into this business, why they started this orphanage, why they started this nonprofit in the first place. Is because they're passionate about something. And it comes right back out again. And then the website and the branding is super easy after that when you have the fire in place. So
Thank you, David.
hopefully this wasn't too overwhelming. Thank you, Mark, for your time. Kick it back for any questions.
So we have a few more minutes left. Does anyone have any questions? David's website again is in the chat, wildmandesigns.com. I'm sure he'd be happy to hear from you. And his contact information, I'm sure, is on his website.
Yeah, but any questions that
if you have a question, unmute yourself. No questions.
I guess I have a comment. What do you expound a little bit on this? I'm the hero versus I'm the guide. You know, I think my approach has always been with a website. Hey, I've got to tell people what I'm about and how experienced I am and how great I am, because if I don't tell them how great I am, they're not going to want to do business with me, right?
Yes.
So I think that's a big
question.
Shift.
Absolutely. Great question. So there's 2 components to the hero. A hero needs to show empathy and authority. A lot of people do really well on the authority aspect of it. They talk about, you know, this is what I do. This is how long we've been in business. These are the certifications that we have. They forget about the empathy. The empathy is you remember how these things will actually benefit the hero in the story. So that's how the language changes the position of it too. In the website, remember, first is the aspirational header of who the hero wants to become. The second is the problem that the hero faces. You don't show up until section 3 of the website. That's probably the biggest difference on it. You can still talk about your certifications, your authority that you have, but where it shows up on the website makes a big difference. If it's all the way at the top, people are like, he only talks about himself. But if you warm it up, you address of who they want to become, you acknowledge that there's problems, you acknowledge how they feel about it, all of a sudden now they're looking for the guide, and that's where you show up. So the authority statements that you make become a whole lot easier for people to swallow because they're now in that phase of the story. If you lead with that, they shut down. So a lot of it is not necessarily whether I can say it or not, it's how I say it and when I say it. Right? I've been married for 15 years. I've learned it's important how you say things and when you say things, right? And then it works. So does that answer your question on that?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. That's great.
As a reminder, because David shared quite a bit of information with us tonight, the recording of this will be shared back with you by an email, likely within the next several days. We look forward to seeing you then on the first Tuesday of September. If you have any interest in the meantime, join our Facebook group or send us an email. With that, on behalf of Tech for Good and Southwest Florida, and we want to say thank you again for being here tonight. Good night.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate it.